Landon Donovan knows what he was going through in that year and why he needed to step away, but it affected him coming back to the national team. It cost him a World Cup. I don't think that's opinion. I think that's an actual fact. He was Christian Pulisic before Christian Pulisic, and the parallels between the two are uncanny, which is why for me it is very strange that he is saying this.
Let's do this with all the vibes of the opening scenes of Apocalypse Now. It's time to preview the United States men's national team's 2025 Gold Cup campaign. First of a three-part pod series where we preview the entire Gold Cup field. This pod will focus on the US men's national team. And the next two take a closer look at Mexico, Canada, and all of our CONCACAF cousins near and far. But we're starting with the US of A. And as we pod, our nation's finest have just lost a staggering 3 games on the trot. We've just lost to Turkey at the weekend, but into the opening group stage with optimism, right? We're playing 100th in the world, Trinidad and Tobago, June 15th in San Jose. Famous CONCACAF team checks notes. Saudi Arabia ranked 58th by FIFA the following Thursday in Austin, and then we close with a please don't be must win against 83rd ranked Haiti on June the 22nd. What could go wrong with that? Look, however you cut it, these are important games. The last competitive matches this Mauricio Pochettino squad will play before they open the World Cup in June 2026 in Los Angeles, less than a year away when you hear this. And when I say squad, this is quite a 26 for various reasons, some of them by choice, be it players' own or managers. Christian Pulisic, Yunus Musa, Josh Sargent, Tim Weah, Weston McKennie and more are not there. Flo Balogun and Zach Steffen have subsequently dropped out with injury. 15 players, 60% are MLS players. It's honestly a bit like the movie The Replacements, and our US men's national team is suddenly just the Washington Sentinels. Whether this is a sign of a huge transformation to come, and Pochettino's just going to banish some of the bigger names that we know and love from our squad, or this is just Gold Cup. It's not close to being where it yearns to be as an elite regional competition. Our Euros, our Copa, no big deal. It's a wild time, however you cut it. And to try and make sense of all of this, it's incredible to welcome a gent who I often turn to process the complexities of our region's football. Former Liga MX and US men's national team star turned ESPN broadcaster and hosted the quite magical Vamos show here on the Men in Blazers Media Network. Live from Raleigh, Durham, it's Mr. Herculez Gomez.
Raj, how you doing? That's right, I am in Raleigh. It's a magical little town and that I think deserves more soccer recognition.
By the way, shout out to Beasley's Fried Chicken, which is definitely one of my top 5 fried chickens of all the fried chickens in our nation. Herc, let's dive right in, because our nation soiled itself last year's Copa America on home turf. We then proceeded to lose to Mexico, a reverse 2-0, and then I don't know how to call it, was it a DOA through March's Nations League? We got beat, out-hustled, out-run, out everything by both Panama and Jesse Marsh's Canada, as they're now officially called. We are taping just after we lost against Turkey, and now we Gold Cup. And it is for complex reasons. I've just tried to lay some of it out. Shocking and saddening, I think, for the fan base, to be honest. We're doing it with a squad filled with fringe players and understudies. Be honest with me. Be a voice of reason, as you so often are. Where are we on a scale of panic between 1, nothing to see here, or 10, 2017 in Cuba, Trinidad and Tobago levels of panic? Where are we between those?
We're not levels of Copa panic yet. This is standard practice for the Gold Cup, Raj. When has the U.S. really taken the Gold Cup seriously? If we go back through its history in Gold Cup, they've not taken it seriously 5 of the last 6 editions. In fact, look at the last time they won the Gold Cup. With the actual C team in Las Vegas and Miles Robinson goal, and it's done the Mexico A team, Tata Martino. That was the end of the Mexican national team heading into their darkest era and the rise of the Berhalter era. I go through the list, and you had players like Donovan Pines on that list, Sam Vines. You had players on there like Matthew Hoppe. You had players on there like Jesse Zardes, and they won that Gold Cup. So the U.S. hasn't prioritized the Gold Cup in quite some time. Now, I'm not saying that's correct. It's just not ideal heading into a World Cup. This was supposed to be the dry run.
By the way, you say Jossie Zardes. This is where I am emotionally. I'm like, God, I'd bite your arm off for a Jossie Zardes right now in this squad. Like, in context, on our journey, you're still like, this is just a Gold Cup. We don't take Gold Cup seriously. This is not a serious tournament. That's where you are right now. You're like, don't panic. The losses, the Copa, the Nations League, the big players not performing, the culture, the vibe, the Pochettino comments, as we'll dig it. You're like, yeah, no biggie. Gold Cup, we just don't take it seriously. Draw a line under that.
That's where I am if it wasn't a World Cup year. Ideally, the U.S. men's national team would know a starting 11, would know players coming off the bench, would have an idea of the core of this team heading into the biggest moment in U.S. soccer history, a World Cup on home soil. 1994 changed America, changed footy in this country forever. 2026 was supposed to be the rocket fuel to take it on to the next. And we have more questions than answers. A new coach that's telling us it's okay to lose because he saw positive things. You have players, and we'll get into it, who are deciding a year out from a World Cup, this isn't the moment. It's a Gold Cup, and I would tell you, relax. It's Gold Cup. The U.S. has never taken it seriously. They've proven that. A year out from the World Cup, this is far from ideal.
You are both having your footballing cake and eating it. By the way, podcast for another day. I still think World Cup 2026 can be massive for football in this country, and the United States can go 3 and out like that. Those two, the United States performance right now, I would like this team to step up. I would like this team to step up now. You feel the inertia and apathy, and we'll talk about it amongst even the bubble fan base right now. This team has an opportunity this summer to begin to light a fire. That's ultimately what we would love. But success in the World Cup and United States success, they're almost on parallel tracks in this moment. This is kind of where we are. But I read something that Claudio Ranieri, beautiful, beautiful Claudio, said this summer at the end of his quite fairy tale return to Roma. He said, this is football. Sometimes it gives you beautiful things. Other times, less beautiful. You need to know how to accept it. Let's just say we are in a less beautiful moment for all those who love football in this nation right now. But before we dive in, let me ask you this. How much did this summer matter? Really, how much does it matter? I spoke to Tyler Adams last weekend. I was with him in Eden, Pennsylvania, when he opened the mini court, a show that's just gone up on our YouTube earlier this week. I said, these are the last competitive games, Tyler. He said, bro, they're all competitive. Every game matters. Friendly, not friendly. Can you give a baseline? How big is Gold Cup right now? I thought it was sizable. I thought it was building in to be the Euros of our region. That's what it could and should be. It's also the last real competitive games before we World Cup. But before we tear our hair out, in my case, kind of like just shine up the front of my bald head, could it be that the Gold Cup played every other year, but with a depth of competition at a fraction of a Copa? We've won it 6 times in the last 25 years. Is that where we are? It just doesn't mean that much. It's a tournament that you can only lose but not really win.
It's not about the competition, Raj. It's not about playing, the likes of Costa Rica. It's not about playing Guatemala or Jamaica, because you can arguably make a case like those aren't the games that make you better. You're banking on everybody being available. So this was a great opportunity to have players for an extended period of time to maybe understand Pochettino and Pochettino understand them. But the reality is, and this isn't just opinion, this is fact, U.S. soccer has shown that the Gold Cup does not matter. They have prioritized different tournaments, different things throughout the years, and the Gold Cup has gone through the wayside.
So let's talk about where we are within that framing. And let's start at the beginning. How I wish we didn't have to talk about this again and pass it off as old news, water under the bridge. But honestly, this is such an enormous shadow caster. No matter what happens on the field this summer, dominant storyline of this US men's national team. Reality is who's not with us. And we have to address this because notable absences include, deep breath, Weston McKennie, Tim Weah, Gio Reyna out for Club World Cup. Injuries have taken out Flo Balogun, Ricardo Pepe, Anthony Robinson, belatedly Serginho Dest, and Zach Steffen, not selected, Josh Sargent, Joe Scally, Cameron Carter-Vickers of your Scottish champion Celtic. But probably most key, 2 players who elected not to report themselves. One, Yunus Musa, just 19 starts, I think, for AC Milan this season. And the man in the spotlight, Christian Pulisic. Look, his story's really well known by now, but it is nonetheless sizable. His name, not on the initial roster. US Soccer's sporting director, Matt Crocker, then took, for me, quite the unusual step of putting out a statement briefing that it was the player's choice. And I've talked about that at length with Clint Dempsey on last Friday's show. He talked about his mentality was to report no matter the pain, no matter the sacrifice, even when he desperately didn't want to go in. And I know things are always different from the inside. And Christian Pulisic may well have a physical or profound mental need for a break. But to not message, to stay silent at the very time his team, of which he's been the captain, are having a terrible run of performances, which have had many of the former players, now pundits, lose their minds, talking about the weak mentality and the lack of fight of this squad. Landon Donovan, the latest to really talk about it. And that's a gentleman that battled his own mental demons during his career. As a former US international yourself, how do you unpick this, Herc?
What I will say to those players, and I'm in that group, you've not come close to the club level career that Christian Pulisic has had. Keylor Navas for years would decline to play the Gold Cup. He played 2 editions in his illustrious career. Why? Because of the amount of games he was playing throughout the year with Real Madrid. Now, people would say, well, Milan's going to play in those important competitions. Fair. But they want to play in those important competitions. And Christian Pulisic is a massive player for them. And Christian Pulisic has asked to rest in Milan. That wasn't afforded to him. He played injured. It didn't get right. And heading into a World Cup year, he saw an opportunity to correct it, and he took it. So I think for Matt Crocker and US Soccer to do that was a bit Bush League. They're throwing the player under the bus. Now, Yunus Musa, I think it's a different situation. AC Milan's pretty much told him, Yunus, you got to go find somewhere else. And in finding somewhere else, he's got to be available to be there and win himself a spot, an opportunity for what's going to be the biggest year of his upcoming life. I understand the sentiment by the big players in US. Yes, and they use Messi and Cristiano, and that's great. I understand. You're using the exception to the rule. I understand. Lamin's played so many games. Look at him now. I understand. But that's not the case. That's not the case for Christian Pulisic. It's not the case for the majority of players around the world who have national team commitments, who see that their national team right now maybe isn't their priority. I don't excuse it, but that's what's going on.
I think the messaging is a little more complicated. When you talk about US soccer, Christian has yet to address it himself. Normally, when a player has an injury or a challenge, the player or the club will brief the world. That's where you'll hear it. Ultimately, this summer, Christian, it looks like, will only appear in commercial obligations on his platform. In the olden days, your day, players would turn up even when they were injured and then be announced. They go through the token gesture of turning up at camp. This team is utterly floundering. And to have these players not turn up, and also part of the calculation is knowing that the media don't even care. This is how small we are in this moment. US soccer, the national team is such a blip in the American sporting consciousness. This is how far we've fallen. Your average American sports fan watching the Pacers and the Thunder, God bless you, Alex Caruso. I mean, they are not even thinking about the US soccer team. So you can take a day off, you can take a week off, you can take a summer off, and there's no media howl. I said this to Clint, if Harry Kane said, guys, not turning up for England for a Euros, I want to keep myself fresh for the World Cup, the English tabloid media, the English fan base, they would destroy them. We're almost afforded the fact that the game is still in the shadows here, Herc. That is probably the saddest part of all of this for me.
But it's not something foreign to us in CONCACAF. Carlos Vela for years refused to play with the Mexican national team. Carlos Vela, in my eyes, is one, if not the most talented Mexican player I've ever seen. In a pool with players like Hugo Sanchez, Rafa Marquez, he's one of the most talented players that's ever stepped on the field. He refused to play. Now, Christian Pulisic, there's a lot we don't know because he's not spoken out, and he doesn't seem like the type of guy who's going to speak out. Maybe we'll find out years later. But excuse my language, I think it's horse when guys like Landon Donovan come out and speak out against Christian Pulisic for taking time off, where Landon Donovan, and I was part of this group, took a sabbatical for over a year. And Landon Donovan knows what he was going through in that year and why he needed to step away. But it affected him coming back to the national team. It cost him a World Cup. I don't think that's opinion. I think that's an actual fact.
What was it like for you internally when that happened? I interviewed Landon in that period, and it was very clear to me why he needed that break.
I know Landon on a personal level because we played club soccer together. We're the same age group. I've seen him from afar and I've seen him up close, and I have a tremendous amount of sporting respect for Landon and what he's done. But when he's not there as a team member, in that actual moment where we're playing on a cricket field in Antigua and Barbuda, we're down and we're not going to the hexagonal. We're not going to the next round of World Cup qualifying. We're going to literally bow out before that. And it takes Eddie Johnson and Alan Gordon to come off the bench and save us 2 goals to get to that next level. You're sitting there and you're thinking, well, these are the guys who were here. Where's our star player? That's what you're thinking. And you get to the next round and you breeze through. But people forget. People forget. You know who didn't forget? Jurgen Klinsmann. That's who didn't forget. These are moments that unify and harden a team together. And I'll never have the experiences that Landon Donovan had at the international level.
By the way, Landon carried the game on the field for an extended period of time, and also commercially, he was the face of the game. That was an incredible amount of pressure.
He was Christian Pulisic before Christian Pulisic, and the parallels between the two are uncanny, which is why for me it is very strange that he is saying this. I can see Clint Dempsey saying this. When he was at Fulham, every single year he had to prove himself. He was Weston McKennie at Juventus. Even his short stint at Spurs, he would have to continue to prove himself. So that's just in that mentality. It's ingrained. Christian Pulisic has won a Champions League medal. Christian Pulisic is arguably the face of one of the biggest sporting brands in footballing history in Milan. Say what you want about Milan today. That is a massive, massive brand with massive internal pressure. So when you look at the two situations, I can see Christian Pulisic saying, okay, if I need to take time off, if I need to prioritize my health, when can I do it?
So fan sentiment seems to fall into two buckets. Just looking randomly on USMNT only, the school of thought that, quote, he's too valuable long-term, let Christian rehab, lock in, come back sharp for the World Cup. It's the smart move. Football always rational and emotional. There's a quote on USMNT only, I think from a GFOP at Josh3000. Our squad now sees the crest as a chore. Clint saw it as a fist fight. He got paid to join. So there's kind of is that dissonance. But let's move on and talk about who is there in the present day. This squad announced for the Gold Cup. My God, it is like going to the theatre to see the new George Clooney play and finding out that he's off and an understudy's performing in his place. But the big story, 15 of the 26 are from MLS. 5 of the players before the summer had 0 caps. First of all, what is this that we're watching? Is this a matter for you of Pochettino trying to cope with all these absences? Or is this a manager who is sick with the flatline attitudes and lack of fight of some of his biggest players and actually open auditioning to get rid and replace some of them? Like he did at Spurs. At the beginning of Spurs, I said this to Clint, that he came in, saw Adebayor, did not like his attitude in training. Yunus Kabul, got rid of them, and then got young players who were very malleable, listened for, like Eric Dyer, Ryan Mason, a young Harry Kane. Ultimately, is he just looking for players he can work with, young, obedient hustlers?
I think there's definitely a message being sent, because we can sit here and say, well, he's not playing with the full deck. You don't have an Anthony Robinson. You don't have a Christian Pulisic. You don't have a Yunus Musa. You don't have Giovanni Reina. You don't have Weston McKennie. You don't have Timothy Weah. We can sit here and say, you still don't have players that are valuable like Serginho Dest because he's not far along in his rehabilitation after his ACL reconstruction. So you can sit here and make these excuses of why he's not playing with the full deck and why he needs to identify players. But you have a Cameron Carter-Vickers, who's a Champions League player. You have an Austin Trusty. You have a Josh Sargent. You have a Joe Scally. Like, what's going on and what happened in previous camps where Mauricio Pochettino feels the need to identify other players in these positions and to leave these players who are European-based off the roster. And if I'm a player that's not named Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, Christian Pulisic, Anthony Robinson, one of these locks, I better get dialed in. I better lock this up. Because I'm not good enough to be afforded that luxury to miss out and it not affect me. That's a clear message. And it's also a message to the Major League Soccer player. Because there came a time with Greg Berhalter where the message was clear. If you were in Major League Soccer, you had to leave. Or you had to be clearly head and shoulders above the rest to be on the radar, to be in that bubble. Well, now the message is you're just as good. Now the message is it doesn't matter where you play. I'm going to see you, and when I see you, I want you to perform. So there are 2 clear-cut messages here, one for the domestic players, the MLS-based player, and one for the European player. But ultimately, it's Mauricio Pochettino saying, hey, I've not seen enough.
By the way, I can't stop thinking about what Poch said when he announced the squad. This quote, Herc, if you arrive at the camp, you want to spend nice time, play golf, go for dinner, visit family, visit friends. Is that the culture we want to create? No. He actually said no several times.
Now,
what we want to do is go to the national team, arrive, be focused, spend all focus and energy on the national team. What does that tell you? I mean, that quote tells you both what he wants, but tells you that's the clearest insight into what we've seen, or through his eyes, as to what happened over the past year. It's almost like our US culture's turned into, when he says that, the golf, the dinner, the family, the friend. It's almost into like vacation resort mindset.
This isn't just this generation, Raj. This is previous generations, and the European player comes back to the national team. The Liga MX player comes back to the national team. Whatever the case may be, it's a refresher. You're going from one situation where you're heavily criticized for every move that you make. You go out to dinner, there's pictures being snapped. Do you have a bottle of wine in front of you? Do you have a beer in front of you? You go out to a restaurant, you go out to the movie theaters, there are pictures being snapped. You will be judged on every single move. Where will this not happen if you're one of these big players? It's not going to happen with the U.S. men's national. So it's a breather, it's a refresher. They come back, they do things that normally throughout the week they would not do, because also those times are afforded to them. I don't think that's a bad thing. But what I think is, when you prioritize your time away from the field instead of the time on the field, making the most of it, that's when it becomes a problem. All things are good when you're winning. But when you are not winning, the coach is going to change these things. So if these things are important to you, well, prove it on the field. Win yourself these luxuries.
So who is the pressure on more? The players, most of whom they're now kind of babies, plus Tim Ream, aged 87, or is it on Pochettino himself to show he is what we thought he was when he was announced last August? And he is. I mean, he's proven it. He's a culture builder. Grinta, the fight, the struggle, the spirit. Really, a man able to what he would bring in that South American kind of utter sacrifice to the collective that is a hallmark of him at his best.
It's on Mauricio Pochettino, because that's what you're paying $6 million for a year annually. He's one of the best paid international managers in the game, period. So it's on Mauricio Pochettino. You mentioned that culture change. Well, he's part of that culture. What have we seen from Mauricio Pochettino? We've seen more of him in charity matches for YouTubers. We've seen more of him at Newell's Old Boys with his buddies. We've seen more of him in the news as a possible replacement for Spurs. We've seen more of these things than the meetings with dual nationals, than the meetings with the big players in Europe, than the rubbing of elbows with those people in top positions around Europe that could maybe place his players in better situations. We've seen more of that than we have him actually succeeding on the field. So it goes both ways. The thing that gets us most excited about this national team is where these players play at the club level. They've not done anything of worth at the international level. That is on the players. And this perception the fan has of the players will not change until they take it upon themselves to change that.
By the way, I bet Pochettino is gobsmacked the United States players would not kill each other to play for the national team. As an Argentinian who knows that any Argentinian player, any Argentinian human being, by the way, no matter how successful, would do anything to pull on the iconic light blue and white jersey of the Argentinian national team.
Americans have a mentality where winning is the most important thing. That's not the mindset on the U.S. men's national team, because at the international level, you've not won. I can see why he feels like that about Argentina, a country with sporting history, a country international team that wins and constantly has won throughout the last decade, or been at the highest of levels to set themselves up to win. That's not the U.S. right now. When we talk about the U.S., we put things in terms in CONCACAF level, and you're trying to establish mentality. Well, you're not talking about a top mentality then.
So that winning leads to the fight to be in that team, and without that, it's like, I mean, it is a fascinating moment where, I mean, ultimately, as you're listening to this, emotionally, there's probably two sides of where you're coming down on all of this. Pulisic show, don't show. The mentality, it's fine, it's not fine, it's all burning down. Whether the players should report, well, you know, how big the Gold Cup is. You can make cases on both sides, but we do not, you know, we can have those opinions, but ultimately we'll find out in this World Cup if we got them wrong or not. These are the stakes that we're dealing with. And now let's look at this depth chart, because I want to break down the team, the squad into its elements. Let's start with the age-old lament for this team. As long as I've done this with you, we've asked the same question as our starting point. Who is going to score the goals? Poch dropped Josh Sargent, prolific in the championship, unable to score for the United States since, I think, is it 2019? Flo Balogun, originally called up. We felt so good. He's back. But then had to leave with ankle injury, which leaves really quite an inexperienced set of options. Alan Gordon could not have been far away from this squad, Herc, if we're looking at it. Paxton Aronson, Patrick Adjaman, oh, what a player he could be in the future. Damien Downs from Cologne, Brian White, MLS hipster favourite from Vancouver Whitecaps. Haji Wright is really the experienced veteran with all of his 15 caps. Honestly, Herc, I felt like I was like 2 injuries away from a call-up here.
You know what the crazy thing about a player like Haji Wright is? He's the last 9 to score a goal in a World Cup. And before him, I believe it was Brian McBride. Legit 9, true 9. And yet something happens throughout the week, Raj, or maybe shows more the tendencies of a wide player. But every time we see him for the U.S. men's national team, he's playing out wide. And I, for the life of me, do not understand this. Take it from a guy who played as a 9 growing up and was put out to a side on the left to get on the field. And you would still find ways to put the ball in the back of the net. But that's not who you are. That's not where you want to be. Haji Wright wants to be in the middle. He wants to be the 9, especially in this group. So if you're Haji Wright, you're telling me, wait a second. Ricardo Pepi's not here. Folarin Balogun's not here. Josh Sargent's not here. And you're telling me I'm behind Patrick Adjaman? You're telling me I'm behind Brian White? And the other 9 in this equation is Damien Downs, and we don't know a lot about Damien Downs, but what we have seen from him in Bundesliga 2 with Cologne, this is a player that scored double-digit goals. If you're Haji Wright, now you got to contend with that as well. If I'm Haji Wright, I'm saying, listen, there's a question about who's going to score the 9, but there's only one guy here that scored for the U.S. men's national in an important tournament. So I want to be that man. This is a massive opportunity in a race that I still feel is wide open.
I love Adjaman. I love the hustle, the spirit. Plays almost with Daryl TK levels of joy. Still so raw. And you mentioned Damien Downs. I am fascinated to see him with Cologne, the German-American, who was one of the drivers of Cologne's promotion season, often compared to a young Miroslav Klose. But essentially saying this is open audition time.
If that's the case, then you need to see more of Damien Downs all the time.
By the way, I don't know how young we're saying. It could be 6-year-old Miroslav Klose that he's compared to.
Fumbling around with the ball at his feet. That'd be great if he comes anywhere close to that. But the reality is, at this stage in the U.S. men's national team's progression, a year out from World Cup, you're still saying, well, what if? What if he can be this player? What if he can be the one to lead the line? And that's not a good thing. And this isn't nothing new to the U.S. men's national team. You're talking to a guy that went to a World Cup, and the 9 was supposed to be Charlie Davies. And then in that World Cup, it was Josie Altidore, Robbie Finley, Edson Buttle, and myself. So a lot of things can change. And through the history of this program, things like this have happened. And I would argue other programs as well. Jurgen Klinsmann, their World Cup 2006. Lucas Podolski, where did he come from? You know, this was a second division player who cracked in and made a name for himself because of Jurgen Klinsmann, and look how that turned out for German soccer. So throughout the history, hot hands have proven they can make a case for themselves. So can these players do that? Yes, absolutely. But you'd like a little bit of an idea.
I'm kind of nudging towards that. That is ultimately the big picture reality, and we will answer that question. But we need to talk from who's going to score the goals to who's going to keep them out, man. The goalkeeper, Zach Steffen, meant to be cover. Really competition for Matt Turner, but poor Steffen, guy cannot catch a break. I ate for him, born under a bad sign, had to leave camp with a knee injury. Here's our goalkeepers in this squad. Chris Brady. 0 caps. Matt Fries just made his debut against Turkey A. Matt Turner, who's actually one of the veterans on this team with 51 caps, but his last competitive game for Palace, I think was the 3-1 FA Cup game over Millwall back in, was it right the first day of March, did not play a single league game this season. Herc, where are we?
With all due respect to a Matt Fries, a Chris Brady, a Zach Steffen, the pole position right now is Matt Turner. Unless something drastically happens, unless his mistakes are on display for the world to see at the international level, he's not going anywhere. Because go back to the Tony Meola years, go back to the Brad Friedel, the Casey Keller, the Tim Howard, go back to those years. That was the strongest position. If anything, the U.S. produced goalkeepers. This is the worst generation of American goalkeepers that I've ever seen. I don't even think it should be an opinion. Look where these players are. The predecessor, like the ones before them, they were playing, not just there, in big venues.
Casey Keller, think about it, baby. Think about it. I'm telling you, there's a slot. There are a lot of newcomers that we've got to sift through, hoping to impress. Diego Luna is clearly the people's favourite. Really a romantic footballer. A gent who Poch has declared has, quote, his words, big balls, a maverick hustler of a footballer. A bit like Clint Dempsey's spiritual heir. A lot of interesting stories in this squad. Alex Freeman of Orlando City, son of former NFL wide receiver Antonio Freeman, got a chance to stake a claim in that vast fullback depth chart. A lot of bodies, not a ton of real options though. If we're being honest, Nathan Harriel, the Philadelphia Union defender, fascinatingly flexible in the back line. Jack McGlynn, free passing sniper, now playing at Houston. A poem of a goal against Turkey raised our hopes inside 59 seconds. But who catches your eye? Herc, in this squad, this replacement squad, so to speak, who should we be watching?
Luca De La Torre, in the brief moments we've seen him, looks like an improved Luca De La Torre. San Diego has given him that confidence. He's now a two-way player that steps into the box, arrives late, and is scoring goals. He's an option all the time. I thought he was very good. He's very composed, and he's got European pedigree. So it's not a replacement, but it is a player that maybe under Greg Berhalter didn't get that shine or that opportunity, who could get it here. I think that's a big player going forward. And as for the rest, the ceiling is what excites me about these players, but I think it's extremely unfair for these players to be auditioning together in this way. Normally, in a regular national team setting, you introduce one or two with the core group and you ease them along. You build their confidence going forward. You see what they can do. It's an open audition with a bunch of guys who are auditioning as well. And so when it doesn't work, you lump them together. I think that's extremely unfair.
This is what happened after 2017. Just a whole generation gone. I mean, this is an echo. It's different. And the reality as to why the players are not in this camp is very different. But fascinating to watch Sebastian Berhalter, by the way, son of Greg. No Nepo baby at all. His run with Vancouver through the CONCACAF Champions Cup was career changing. Honestly, fascinating. Gives echoes of Michael Bradley helping Jurgen Klinsmann teams at their best after his dad had been fired. But again, this group is so young. US Soccer often puts out a note for the team saying, wow, this team's average age is 23.8. That's to be kind of not a great thing. It kind of hints the experience is not there. Again, the leadership is not there. Leadership remains a challenge for this team. We got Tim Ream, who I always joke is 87 years old. Matt Turner is a veteran on this team, 51 caps. Brendan Aronson, I think, is the next biggest cap winner. But I do think this is important. We yearn for leadership. We yearn for a spokesperson. We desperately need someone to call crap out when they see it. We want a leader in a moment of darkness. Very quickly, who should be captain?
Tyler Adams is the leader of this team. He's the one player who constantly wants to be there, constantly wants to hold players accountable. He's the one guy that I would pick in a moment to speak to the world about who the U.S. men's national team is and can be, and make sure those players understand that that's who they need to be. Out of everything you've asked me, this is the easiest to answer.
Also, you think of his mindset. The dude has just finished a grueling season for Bournemouth. He's had his own injury demons. He's getting texts from the WhatsApp group being like, yeah, I'm not reporting. Yeah, not reporting. Yeah, I'm not being caught. Like, he had 4 days break and he's going again. His mentality is fascinating to me. I heard Clint in his show on Friday said, do you think I wanted to report January camps? Do you think I wanted to go in when I was super injured and had to have injections in my groin? I mean, Tyler's mentality, to be candid, is the one that we got to follow. I want to touch very quickly on Poch. 8 months in, man is meant to bring that winning environment. Record currently 5 wins, no draws, 4 losses. He had a beard last week, which was completely white. It was like watching Obama age in his second term presidency. Is there such a thing as a Pochettino hot seat?
No, I cannot see this federation, after going out and spending $6 million a year on a coach, pulling the plug. I think if Mauricio Pochettino doesn't get to the World Cup, it's his doing, not the federation's. Now, Mauricio Pochettino, I think, is learning that it's very difficult and very different to run an international team as opposed to a club team. And those difficulties, well, you don't have these players for an extended period of time. You can't work on the things that you need to. But I'm going to give Mauricio Pochettino the benefit of the doubt here because he's not played with the full deck. When has he had on the field together or even time to work on the practice field with an Anthony Robinson, a Serginho Dest, a Chris Richards and partner, a Tyler Adams, a Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, Giovanni Reina, Christian Pulisic, and a 9, that 9 being a Ricardo Pepi or Fala and Balogun? When has he had time to work with that spine in any given moment? And the answer is he's not had that time. And it's always something. This player's not here. This player's injured. So I will still give him the benefit of the doubt. But versus Turkey, there was moments of that game, the first 20, 25 minutes, where I said to myself, this is kind of impressive from Mauricio Pochettino because he's managed to have a team that's never stepped on the field together, a few debutants, and the idea of we have to press the rival up the field, the idea of we have to be different, the idea of we have to attack with the ball, we have to play this certain type of brand was there. It was there. Now, goals change games. An unfortunate error from a player like Johnny Cardoso, who's had multiple opportunities on the U.S. men's national team at that platform and has yet to match his club form. And you're in the hole.
That's the reality, Herco, though. Like, that's the big question. Why are our guys that we see performing for their clubs, why are they not able to carry a shadow of that through? You know, you talk about Turkey A, almost leaving it, the message was that we did not implode. This young team of ours was progress. They kept trying. Like, we love that. But it's ridiculous to have to write that as a positive. But after the Nations League self-immolation, that's where we are right now. We are, I just want to name that, we're living in a world of lowered expectation.
Yeah.
That is exactly where we are. And I don't know, a sidebar convo for another day. I don't know why we feel the need to play complicated build from the back football. With this young squad who barely play together, with reps and chemistry that you need to play that. That's a long conversation about why we constantly feel the need to play complicated football as the United States men. What I do know is how a year out from the World Cup, we have no sense of the spine of our team. From the striker right through to a reliable goalkeeper. I remember innocent days like Tracy Chapman driving in a car. I remember looking at this Gold Cup schedule a year ago. I remember thinking, it'll be an opportunity for finishing touches on the squad. Instead, here we are. Canada just whacking Ukraine 4-2. Well, we're still on the starting grid, essentially. We're open casting for talent who could be the building blocks of our squad for the most important tournament for the men's game in terms of the possible payoff ever. We have zero idea who the spine of this team is.
We have an idea of who we'd like it to be. But can those players be those players healthy and in form a year out from now? I have no idea. But I can sit here and say, I could see Matt Turner. I could see Chris Richards +1 still open. I could see Tyler Adams. I could see Weston McKennie. I could see a +1 next to them remains to be open. I can see a Christian Pulisic, and I can see a 9 remains to be open. But that's a pretty good spine. And then when you add that you can see the outside backs who, for me, are the catalyst of this program, or the catalyst of this team, and an Anthony Robinson and a Serginho Dest, that's a pretty good idea of who you are and what you want to be.
You're making me feel it again, Herc. You're making me feel it. I got to say, I will go out on a limb and say one of those big names that you have named will not be back in this squad. I've got a feel, knowing how Pochettino has worked in the past, it's not kind of like, he will get control of this team. He will get their attention. He will get the golf clubs down.
And that's a massive, massive message sent. The type of message that when you receive it, regardless of who you are, sends chills down your spine. If one of those players I just named is not there because Mauricio Pochettino is sending a message, that is a massive message sent.
Ultimately, just looking at his track record, Herc, of how he's worked in the past, I'd be equally as surprised if he's just like, easy come, easy go. That's how we roll. This is ultimately, he's in a moment of control, fight for control, fight for culture.
And he's been sending those messages out, right, Raj? I mean, that's essentially what he's been saying. Christian Pulisic being his decision, they could have easily kept that in-house. And then Anthony Robinson with his surgery, and you just say, oh, well, this is why you keep somebody like that out, you know? People would have followed suit, but they wanted that to be out there. And that's fine. That's fine if they want to send that message. If you use a player like Christian Pulisic to send a message, the rest follow suit, and I have no issue with that.
You've said we're not favourites for this whole tournament. What are we? What can pass as American success?
Let's take a picture of CONCACAF today. I think there is an improved version of Canada that is very easy to see. Jesse Marsch has a very, very well-oiled machine with a massive chip on their shoulder. Reminds me of the early 2000s U.S. men's national team trying to gain respect within CONCACAF. They've got a very good team with playmakers all around the field. Mexico right now, I think, even though they've won some tournaments, has more questions than answers. Who will they be? The pragmatic team that can get a result versus the likes of Canada and the U.S., or a team that struggles with any type of cohesive play in Honduras and get beat by Honduras? A team that looked like they were exiting the last 5 years, which has been the darkest time in Mexican soccer's modern history, or a team under Javier Aguirre that can once again prove they are the kings of CONCACAF. Costa Rica, the generational change. The enigma that is Jamaica. Jamaica on paper has as a talented team as anybody in this field in CONCACAF, yet they can never put it together on the field. Guatemala. There are all these questions. What will the Dominican Republic look like after finally qualifying for the World Cup, after being second place in the U20s in CONCACAF? This generation coming up with all these players in Europe. There's all these questions. And yet I've seen the U.S. men's national team win this competition with a C team. I've seen them do it against better Mexican national teams. I think the expectation has to be to compete. And when I say compete, I'm not talking about getting out the first round. I'm not talking about making it to the quarters. I'm not talking about making it to the semifinals. I think the obligation for the U.S. men's national, regardless of who they have with this team, what I saw in these friendlies, is to compete to win the Gold Cup. Because I think that's how CONCACAF is. And I think this tournament is designed in a way, let's not be naive, for Mexico and the U.S. to meet in the final. And I still think that's the expectation.
God, that's the expectation. We'll talk about the reality in a moment. I've got to say, having listened to Jesse Marsch, you can hear him in the next episode of our previews. He has got something to say about that. The North has got something to say. I just pray it's not going to be a long, hard summer. All I want is to show a pulse, some fight, make us believe. We would settle for evidence of forward momentum. There's so in the bubble fan base, never mind the outside world of potential fans, there is so much inertia. It's so many questions. We're almost like Everton fans at this moment. We kind of watch in hope of scattered moments that make us feel something, a sense of pride, a sense of optimism, the flickering sense of being alive. But hard question, Herc. Let's pull this together. How real is a level of worry that we're going to embarrass ourselves at World Cup 2026? Horrible question to ask, but needs to be asked in this moment.
If the World Cup were today, I would tell you that's the expectation, is that there could be an embarrassing moment for the U.S. men's national team on their home soil in an expanded World Cup. If Brazil could be embarrassed, touchdown +1 on home soil in a World Cup, there's no reason why we should be optimistic if the World Cup was today about the U.S. men's national team not being embarrassed in the World Cup. They've not shown us anything today to feel optimistic about the World Cup being today and not being embarrassed. That being said, the U.S. men's national team, Americans in this country, in those type of moments, they galvanize, they come through, they love winners. And if this team can start winning in the group phase and carry a bit of momentum, the country's going to be behind them. It's going to be rocket fuel in the way that 1994 spawned a domestic league and is what it is today on the men's side in the game. It's going to take it to the next level. And by the way, not just for the U.S. I talk about the rocket fuel for the U.S. Canada's waiting for their 1994 boom. They can have that. Mexico has consistently been that mid-table team that can't crack the barrier at the world stage. They can have that. So this is rocket fuel for CONCACAF. It's a pivotal moment in CONCACAF's history of having a tournament here, but you need good showings. And I think all three can have good showings. But the U.S. in particular, if you can have that great showing, if you can make that run, the country will get behind you.
Make a prediction, Herc, because what you said is beautiful and quite emotional. What's going to happen? Spoiler alert, the tournament from a US perspective for me.
I think this U.S. team's going to surprise us. There are moments where I see the tactical hand of Mauricio Pochettino, and it meets the expectations mentally. And I think they will surprise us. I don't think the U.S. men's national team win, but I think there are plenty of positives to take away from this tournament. Now, I understand that them not winning eliminates those positives, but there's another team in the mix, like Canada, another team in the mix, like Mexico, that will have a say. But I think Pochettino shows us something this tournament.
I'll reveal my predictions in episode 2 of this 3-part preview Gold Cup series. It's scheduled to drop tomorrow, Thursday, on both our pod and YouTube feed. I'll be joined by two gents whose content I really love. From the Give and Go in Austin, Texas, Ed Reynoso and Christian Soltero. We will break down Mexico and the rest of the CONCACAF field. Episode 3 with none other than Mr. Jesse Marsh, talking in depth about his vision for Canada in this Gold Cup and beyond. Holy crap, my Gold Cup runneth over. And before we go, Texas GFOPs and those of you heading to the first 2 United States games, come and see Clint Dempsey and me, Rog. That's right, we'll be taping live 2 episodes of Clint's new show, The Deuce, live and in person. We'll be in Austin at BD Riley's Irish Pub, Wednesday, June 18th, and in Dallas, an incredible place I've been longing to go to, the Londoner Addison, Saturday, June 21st. Both shows will take place 7:30 p.m. They are open to the public. All what we ask is that you come ready to raise a glass with Clint and me and RSVP ahead of time. It's first come, first served event until these fantastic bars reach capacity. The link for more is on our podcast and YouTube video. It's also all over our socials. Come be with us. Come and raise many, many glasses. And talk about how you're feeling, what you're seeing, what you believe. These shows are presented by the GFOPs at Camarena Tequila. They will be epic nights. Come and be with us. Herc, it's been a joy to be with you. Other than right here on the Men in Blazers Media Network, let us know where we can find you throughout this tournament.
I'm going to be all over. I may be in Austin, just different times with you, but if you come find me, I'll be Copa Gold Cup. I'll be doing all kinds of crazy stuff, but come find me. And I was always on social and Vamos, the podcast here on the Men in Blazers Network. Don't miss us.
God bless. Yours is the voice I always look for. I never take a second of listening to you for granted. Let's not take a second of watching football together for granted. Go, go USA. Big love and courage.